there, I'm going to talk about the things they carried. I want to read bits and pieces of the passage of what I would like to talk about. Lieutenant Jimmy Cross, gazed at the tunnel, but he was not there. He was buried with Martha under the white sand at the Jersey shore. They were pressed together, and the pebble in his mouth was her tongue. He was smiling. Vaguely, he was aware of how quiet the day was, the sullen Patties, yet he could not bring himself to worry about matters of security. He was beyond that. He was just a kid, at war, in love. He was 24 years old. He couldn't help it. Then, towards the end of the story, on the morning after Ted Lavender died, First Lieutenant Jimmy Cross crouched at the bottom of his foxhole and burned Martha's letters. Besides, the letters were in his head. Now this really stuck with me because I started to realize that, these are the things that goes on even today that men and women in war now probably do. And for Lieutenant Jimmy Cross, this was his stronghold on reality back home. Martha and her pictures and her letters, the pebble that she gave him when they were on the beach together, and he used that as a way of escape. And it wasn't until he started to really open his eyes to what was going on around him and seeing the death and just the horror that was going on that he realized he really needed to stop and put that aside for the time being and stop pretending, stop being a child or childlike and get more involved into what was his duties as a lieutenant, and that was to guide his men and keep them safe. And I often think about what we carry on a day-to-day basis. They talked about in that story that things carried a certain amount of weight in ounces or in pounds, or they were tangible items, things they had to carry or things they just chose to carry, as in Lieutenant Jimmy Cross's pebble was his omen, his item of superstition that made him feel like, as long as I have this pebble, I will be safe, I will be kept from harm. And he just started to realize that the comrades that were passing, who also had the similar superstitions and things that they carried, they no longer had that effect of keeping someone safe. And I think that's when he had that turning point. He realized that this wasn't something that was going to keep him safe. Keeping his mind aware of what was going on around him and sticking to the rules or the plan of action, as they would call it, would keep him safe. Now, back to what we carry on a day-to-day basis as civilians. You got to think about, we carry tangible items that, yes, have weight and measure, but we also carry emotions. We also carry stress. There's so many things in our minds that we carry, and a lot of it comes from media, a lot of it comes from family, a lot of it comes from our own self-awareness, our own self-worth, and it just makes me curious, could we actually weigh the amount of stress? If we could put it on a scale, it probably would weigh a lot, and that's probably something we shouldn't carry around. It's not good for our hearts and our souls and our beings. And anyway, that really made me think of that after hearing those two parts of the passage of the story. And a few other things I wanted to point out was that these men, as they said in the text, they all carried ghosts. Now, in my mind, I took that as they carried the ghosts of the men that they had lost, their friends that they had lost, or they carried the ghosts of people from back home. I mean, so many of them had not felt or believed that they would make it back home alive, and so they probably carried the ghosts of their loved ones, thinking that, well, I will never see them again. And, that, imagine that on your heart, carrying that around. Um, and I also noticed another part of the text that said, they shared the weight of memory. Now, that I took as together as a group, they shared the weight of memory of the loved ones that they had back home, the men that they had lost. Perhaps they maybe sat around and, would talk about how, how much that person meant to them. In most cases, they probably didn't. But I take that as maybe that's what that meant, was that they all had bits and pieces of the memory of the person that was lost. And that's what that meant, was that they shared the load of the memory of that person. Anyway, well, I hope that gave you a bit of insight on the things they carried. It was very, very insightful on what a soldier would have to carry around, other than the emotions and the memories. It was very interesting. My husband, of course, who is into weapons, was intrigued to hear, oh, well, what's the caliber of that? And, wanted me to kind of read a little bit of it to him, which was kind of neat because we kind of carried a dialogue about it. But I wanted to touch on Jimmy Cross's experience. That to me, that touched my heart a little more than maybe some of the other men in the story in particular. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my blog. Talk to you later. Bye.